You know, the first thing in my life I saw when I was inside in my mother. It was was no life there, and somebody pulled me in direction in this thing, and through this opening, and outside from my mare. And it was exactly, I have in this time my voice, my voices, but it was such a way when it was very, very unpleasant influence on my voices from the light. That's my beginning.
Right here.
Mike, I want to know from you.
Yeah.
Did you get the sound out of it? Or you only tried it this way? Nobody can stand anywhere near me because then I can't tune or do anything. That's a crazy instrument. It's not your fault. When I play with the symphony orchestra, I'm very how shall I say? I tell the first ones go away. I tell this to go. I need space because you're in the space control area. That's about as near as you can. I remember distinctly being taken to Plaza Hotel to meet this great Professor Theremin and to see his invention. And I remember going there with Dr. Vinogradov and meeting this very interesting, fascinating man and hearing this ethereal and heavenly sounds coming from the air.
The theremin specifically, and Leon Theremin's work in general, is the biggest, fattest, most important cornerstone of the whole electronic music medium. That's where it all began. Theremin did more in the early days to get going the idea of electronic music, electronic musical instruments, than any other one person.
Many people do not realize that musical instruments are really mechanical. But now electricity is beginning to show amazing musical possibilities which will ultimately be realized through the use of electrical musical instruments. Here's a curious instrument known as the Victor Theremin, which is played without even touching it.
I met him in 1927 You see, when he came to this country, I was already fascinated by the idea of a mechanical construction of music, so that music could be composed, created, and manufactured by purely technical, preferably electronic means. At that time, of course, I don't have to tell you, electronic engineering was in its infancy. You see, it was something entirely new, and of course we had the electric lights and subways and all this sort of thing, but there was no application, not even radio. I mean, radio was just beginning at that time, and there was no television and no connection between sound and image. I saw that he was the prophet of the future of music.
Close enough for jazz? My mother had read in the newspaper and showed me an article that the Wurlitzer Company was sponsoring a tour of the United States by Mr. Theremin to demonstrate this new and at that time quite remarkable electronic instrument. Mr. Theremin opened the back of the instrument and showed me these large, rather to our present day thought, primitive coils, and explained to me that they created a magnetic field around these metal rods sticking out of the cabinet, and that anything that would carry an electrical capacitance like a human hand or a piece of metal would vary that magnetic field and cause the machine to change pitch and volume.
Over here is a control of pitch. And you can change just the pitch over a 4.5 octave range over here. Over here is a control of volume. And over here you can control just the volume from complete inaudibility up until the full volume that you want. See if we can. The height is determined by the volume. The softer it is, the lower the height. The spacing here, from here to here, is determined by the pitch. And I can change the timbre and change the wave shape. It's remarkable that Leon Theremin didn't have an oscilloscope at his disposal when he designed his original instruments. Even without an oscilloscope, without a way to look at the waveform, he got a fantastic richness of sound and appropriateness of sound by just really using his ears, the same way as Stradivarius designed the first violins back several hundred years ago.
We arranged a concert in Carnegie Hall, and Theremin was, of course, the master of the situation, and he played.
10 theremins were selected for this concert. A semicircle of theremins on the stage. I did the extreme end because I was the only left-handed theremin player, and it looked very good, I suppose, to have me there. What we were supposed to do was simply alternate. Instead of da-da-da-da-da, my part was simply ding, dum, dum, ding, dum, dum, with him coming in between, so that it seemed as though the entire thing was being played by one person. And I said to Theremin, when we rehearsed it, 7 times it's good, and 3 times it falls like a house of cards. And I would hate to have that happen at Carnegie Hall. He said, you are men, and I know it's going to work because you are men. Well, that was a little chauvinistic, but that was his way of giving us courage. And when we were playing that, it so happened that I suppose we became women in his eyes because it just fell apart. But he was not made unhappy by it because all he was after was to show this audience. And mind you, it was a packed house. I'm not talking of the recital hall now. I'm talking in terms of Carnegie Hall, the big house. Clara Rockmore was, of course, the best of us all. I know that Theremin was crazy about her. He was extremely fond of her. Look, she was a beautiful woman.
He was, at that time, courting me, and he prepared for me a beautiful surprise on my 18th birthday, which was in my own room, in conspiracy with my sisters. He arranged for a cake, birthday cake, which I'm sure he didn't bake. I mentioned before that the genius that he was, I don't think he baked the cake, but he provided the cake and arranged for it to be on a little table with a device that as I approached the cake was the same principle as the Theremin. The candle in its center, which was of course an electric candle, would light, and the cake would slowly move and move around just by my approaching. When I moved away, everything stopped. So there was magic in my own room on my own birthday. He took me to the ritziest places, and we were always in evening clothes. This was a different era, you know, very romantic. He was living on 54th Street, and in an old brownstone, which was given to him by his good neighbors and patrons of art, Lucy Rosen and her husband, who gave him that use of the house. He had a studio there downstairs and had Goldberg, who was his companion in Europe already, in working on his electronic instruments.
In the basement was where all the technical work was going on. They had tables all over the place, and all kinds of electronic wires and condensers and tubes and God knows what, all over the place. But in addition to that, there was also Professor Theremin, who was there all the time in his white outfit.
He had a whole group there of people like Slaninsky and Schillinger various people interested in. He had very many different instruments. They had the theremin, the cello that he called cello, which was you held it between your knees and you sort of moved the handle, and that gave a lower sound, more like cello sound.
You can imagine a fingerboard like you have on the cello, except that there are no strings. But what you do have is some kind of a plastic substance, and as you play up and down that, you can play as rapidly as you can on a cello, except you have only the equivalent of one string.
He had a rhythmicon which fascinated people like Schillinger, the musicians who are very scholastically minded.
Well, I'll try a very imperfect demonstration of the rhythmicon, which is an extraordinary instrument because it produces not only overtones, 16 of them, but also each overtone has a number of beats corresponding to its number in the scale. So that number 1 would be, let's say, like this. 1 every 2 seconds. Number 2, which would be the first overtone in octave. 2 to 1. Number 3. 3 to 1. Number 4. 4 to 1. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. And then it goes faster and then and then it sounds like this. The higher, the faster it sounds. Somebody told me about Theremin in Russia when one of his close assistants, a woman, died early in the 1920s, and it was a terrible shock to everybody because she was a member of the group, and also they worked together on various electrical inventions. Theremin said we must not cry over the dead body of our close assistant. We must immediately take steps to create an instrument that would revivify a dead body and not consider death as the end.
I mean, it was a mad scientist's place. In fact, I at times thought he was mad because when he talked to me about his idea of eliminating bridges entirely, but arranging things so that the automobile would simply would be carried along electronically across a river. And I asked him, how much money would that cost? He says, how much money does a bridge cost?
He never stopped. He made inventions at that time. I remember, I think it was past the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. That I remember finding in his studio a cradle with the doll in it, and I wanted, of course, to know why is there a cradle with the doll. Well, he was working on an invention, which I think he perfected, that if anybody leaned over a cradle to steal or kidnap a baby, it would give a signalization without the kidnapper knowing it.
He had wired the walls of Sing Sing so that if a prisoner wanted to escape and he approached the wall to get over the wall, he'd enter the field and the signal would be given off.
Oh, I forgot to mention one of his inventions at that time, which I I found myself very reluctantly demonstrating at Carnegie Hall. The whole idea of this invention was the human body, again being the electric conductor, that all the motions translate immediately into sound, and the way to play on it would be by dance motions, which of course are much larger than the little motions that you make with your fingers. Many famous school dancers tried, and while they were fascinated by it, they could not make music on it.
There were 5 of us, as I recall, who were selected from the von Gröner group to study the Theremin X. So we met at the studio, and Professor showed us, demonstrated the machine, and we were to get a piece of music, a record, and try to create a sound, the sound of the melody, using our bodies. And it was very funny to us because if you moved a finger, it changed the sound, whatever you did. So it was difficult trying to study, trying to dance, and keep this sound going, the melody going. What was striking to me were his eyes. He had fascinating eyes. They were clear blue, and he looked you straight in the eye, and you felt as if he was looking through you.
I went there a couple of times a week, a few times a week, because by that time I said, I've got to master this thing. You know, you become a very frustrated. You see, you want to produce, but you find yourself being constantly frustrated by the complications that the machine itself set in.
I remember being completely fascinated. It gave me an excuse, being in a prayer position. I was on my knees, and then, of course, I could give my hands and my shoulders and my head any kind of thing. It was such fun to choose. You want to make a fifth, you know, you can do it this way, you can lower your head, or you can up. You had the choice. It was working in air and creating the music on the spot.
I was then involved with a black ballet. It was called the First American Negro Ballet. Actually, it preceded Albin Ailey, the Harlem Dancers. It was the very first Negro ballet in this country. They danced Stravinsky's Firebird and works of that ilk. And I might say premier ballerina was Lavinia Williams. And Theremin fell in love with her and ultimately married her.
We knew, instinctively knew, that it wouldn't be the sort of relationship that society would accept. They wouldn't accept her on her level to be with him on his level, or racially.
Those were times when this sort of marriage was not, was frowned upon by so many people.
His friends did drop him, as far as Lavinia said. They didn't approve of the relationship. What was he doing? Professor, Theremin, famous person, with a young black dancer.
We were all told to go upstairs to the second floor. There we saw a box-like object against the wall. It seemed to me to be something like 20 inches, maybe a little bit bigger, I don't recall. And to our amazement, we were able to see on the screen of that television set, which is what it was, what was going on in the basement of that laboratory. And we were seeing it in color. I'm talking about color in those days.
And at that time, I still had to prove to the world that the Theremin instrument was not just a magic toy and wonderful gadget, and that it was a serious musical instrument, seriously taken by people to engage me to play with Philadelphia Orchestra, right? I mean, I could claim to play anything in the privacy of my home, but I have proof, not for my sake, but for the sake of putting it on the professional level on which it was.
She called and told me, she was in tears, she was hysterical, that he had been kidnapped from his studio. And some Russians had come in and had taken, it was incredible. I wondered how they could do it. But she said they'd removed him forcefully.
She was there?
She was there, and they took him away. And she had no idea what was happening, except that she felt he was being spirited out of the country.
I'm sure he wouldn't have gone unless there was some definite reason.
Why didn't
And the only definite reason I could think of was that there was a gun in his back.
We were just both so shocked at the whole thing, that this could happen in America. I couldn't believe that any foreign government could come in. I took it that he was a citizen, that he had some sort of status for living here. And I just couldn't understand how people could come in the daytime or whatever time it was and take somebody out of their house. We know that it was a political reason why he was taken out of this country. It wasn't voluntary. So perhaps if he did not cooperate in some way, or he was in ill favor over there, anything could happen during those days, and it did. So whatever reasons there were, it's a long time now, and I don't exactly remember the details, but she had reason to believe that he was no longer alive.
We did nothing but try to find him through various connections in Washington with people who were, powerful or at least able to, without the slightest result. It was really like having someone that you dearly love and are connected with disappear completely disappear. We didn't know whether he was alive, whether he was dead, or what happened to him. Nothing.
Something about your robe.
My robe? I don't understand.
Oh, forgive me. Something struck me. been having a rather bad time with my nerves lately. Your robe, I mean the dark lines.
But you're ill.
Oh, I'll be all right. Hello.
When I was a kid, just 8 or 10 years old, I liked to build simple electronic projects with my father. And at that time, when you wanted to build a simple project, you subscribed to a hobbyist magazine that told you how to do this. So when I was 14, I built a theremin from a magazine article, and that got me going. All the way through high school, I built one theremin after another. It was just what I was into at the time. So when I was 18, I played a theremin in an assembly at high school. And it was a big thing that I'd made. It was like a little coffin. It was so big. And my science teacher, who never had too kind a word to say to me, said, "Moog," he said, "that's damn good," he said. And then when I was 19, I wrote my first article for that same hobbyist magazine on how to build a theremin. By then I was designing my own.
You're speaking of Hollywood now. That's the only thing that they wanted to make weird noises and spooky. You're supposed to be frightened by the sounds and all that. And that was not what I wanted to add to. I just wanted to be a serious musician, play Bach. I tell you, Stokowski came here and said, "Play Bach for me." That's a compliment.
This concerto for theremin and orchestra was written especially for Clara Rockmore, who is now making her way on stage. She, with the orchestra under the direction of Leopold Stokowski, will now play the first performance of Annis Houlihan's concerto for theremin and orchestra.
Now, facts. That there was a German book on modern music which mentioned a theremin and said the theremin was executed after he returned to Russia. Now, there was reason to believe that something happened to theremin that was not definite, namely that there was an article in a Soviet magazine about electronic instruments, and theremin's name was not even mentioned. Now, that was an extraordinary thing, which was an article published about 1951, 1952, at the worst time of the relationship between America and Russia.
When the motion picture, The Day the Earth Stood Still, was about to be scored by Bernard Herrmann. He wanted to score it along with the other instruments being used for 2 theremins. And there was no one else around that anybody could find that played the instrument. So I volunteered the information that I had had some exposure to the instrument as a kid, and that if they could find me an instrument or rent me an instrument to play, that I would be happy to practice up on it and try and do it.
Imre Klatu Narawat. Macro Pluvao Barata Lukdenso Implicit.
When the visor on the robot came up, you'd hear this kind of a sound.
Good. Latu, Barada, Nikto. Latu, Barada, Nikto.
My husband and I went to Russia, having nothing to do with seeking Theremin, having to do with my husband being curious to finally see where this strange animal meat comes from. Got there at 12 at night. There were many people waiting specially for the dubious pleasure of meeting us. And we arrived maybe 12 o'clock, and as we arrived, and everybody greeted me, my husband bumped into one gentleman leaving who spoke English. He said, I'm a scientist. He mentioned what does you do? I said he's a scientist. And my husband at that moment found the idea to say, if you're a scientist, perhaps you know anything about Professor Leon Theremin. And the man said to him, yes, I had lunch with him today, whereupon he left. Because it was the most dramatic moment after searching for 7 years to come there to meet a man who is leaving, and said, yes, I had lunch with him today. And that's how we found Theremin. So he arranged for me and my husband to meet him in a subway station. And I knew enough not to ask questions. And we met in the subway station with the rackety, with the noise. That was the real purpose of it, that we spoke to each other in this, and we were not being overheard or followed. So there was obviously a constant surveillance of people who are not supposed to meet strangers, or not strangers, but Americans. Very sad, holding hands, and trying to talk to each other. We found out that he was in prison for 7 years.
In life, if somebody will steal something, he will put his in some place. You know, what is place name? You know, Magadan. Magadan, was like Leningrad, Moscow, Magadan, that's it was. And so it was a big group of people special to construct their way to move from one place from the other. And so say was so constructed this such a, supposed to be, I was not free, you know, so it's supposed to in this organization, so like I sitting in this, some kind of turium, or like, but such a way impossible to go out, and was no, nothing I sent. Just the people decided to, you know, what lots of people who people sent in this day. Some of the people was have the, there was, for instance, different kind of, was or still something before, or they give something bad from these people. There were some of the people just political, different, you know. This was. No, so it's different kind. No, I was from the different one of the people who was, he was not exact was about me, but working, saying that it's possible to utilize me, my work, and for years I was utilized in this institution, what have the different kind, electronics things. And then after this was aviation things, and was construction of these streets, you know. And there I was also under construction also again for different kinds of radio electronics. Was supposed to work on different bad things to find the bad things. So I work in this organization between from approximately from from 42nd year till 67. You know, I explain you, it was two way. One sound is with high frequency, and this then we have inside the difference between the frequencies, and we hear the sound correspond the different of frequencies. For this reason, one frequency is constructed with this lamp, and the other is going with this lamp. There also is it going to, for making it louder. This here is the lamps, which is just, change the loudness. And this is the lamps from which the sound going out.
Mr. Crow. Mr. Crow?
And when you rock and roll into that thing, brown dog, rock and roll. You got a brown dog rocking, your brown dog's rolling, you're rolling, you're rocking, the brown dog too. Your neck.
Hello, Mr. Crow. I hope you'll excuse me, sir, but I was just playing your broom.
That's my theremin.
Oh, well, I written your what?
Well, I suppose you came in here to see it.
Oh, yes, that's a very nice theremin.
Not that. You know what I mean.
Huh?
Theremin had an audition with Lenin himself. Lenin said communism is socialism and electrification. You see, at that time, electrification was something new.
Lenin, I don't know, you say Lenin, I don't understand what you say. It's Lenin. Lenin. I demonstrated his 1922nd. He liked music and have some musical sense, and he also tried to play my instrument with good effect.
Clara did a program, an interview and performance program in WQXR, and somebody, not me, but somebody recorded that and sent me the tape, thought I'd be interested. That's how I got to know about Clara Rockmore. I didn't know about her before. She was sort of this remote goddess that did these wonderful things back before I was born, or at the time I was born. This is one of the last instruments of this cabinet shape that I made. The cabinet shape, we call it the Vanguard, because that was a very hip word when we began. But perhaps all in all, maybe 50 or 60 instruments like this, most of them with vacuum tubes, but the later versions all transistorized.
He was talking to the Schermer publishing house, very famous music publishing, had an arrangement with him that if Clara Rockmore will play his theremin at her concerts, they will manufacture it, which was a big thing, because maybe it's a pitiful thing to let that we did not take it up, because maybe by now there would be thousands of theremins, maybe there will be all hundreds of Clara Rockmore swimming around, I don't know. But the fact is that I could not sign anything that I wouldn't do, and my instrument, the second instrument of Theremin's, was superior. And besides that, I had such respect and feeling for Theremin that even if it were not so, I would not dream of suddenly discarding playing the theremin.
I saw Shostakovich who visited me, and I asked him innocently, I said, what happened to Theremin? Why is his name not mentioned in special articles about it? Now, Shostakovich himself never used the theremin of Vox in his compositions. And he said sort of reluctantly, oh, about theremin I can say nothing. Now, this sounded as if he'd better not say anything, you know. In other words, theremin was dangerous territory, not necessarily executed, but dangerous territory.
KGB. No, KGB, you don't know. I was officially made like working in this special ministerium. You know what ministerium is? What in Russian it will be Комитет государственной безопасности. This will be people who look and are running everything for different kind, political and the other things. It was also political investigation, political looking, changing and so forth. So it was such organization, correct, ministerium. Have the Ministerium внутренних дел. That's Russian will be Ministerium of Inside Things. When, for instance, some systems was written and not impossible to good enough, with different kind of, with different voices to find there. It's necessary to clean this thing from acoustical. So that's was my specialty to do it. It was the name of this invention. It was secret work.
Но, собственно, конечно, не только Сталин подслушивал это устройство, об этом устройстве Сталин, конечно, знал и посчитал его настолько важным, что дал Леву Сергеевичу первую сталинскую премию. Сталинская премия — это была самая крупная премия в то время в Советском Союзе. Причем сначала его представили ко второй премии, но когда Сталин увидел, что Термену обозначена вторая степень премии, он зачеркнул эту вторую степень и написал первая. Так что...
Where is this document now?
Это, конечно, секретный документ. И он никогда не выходил за пределы КГБ. Поэтому трудно сказать, как очень многие документы, это, видимо, где-то в сейфах КГБ находятся.
Unfortunately, Lavinia died about 2 years ago, a rather sudden, mysterious death in Haiti. She had gone to a restaurant to eat, and after a meal, she became ill at the restaurant and was taken to a hospital, and she never recovered. She had some sort of food poisoning.
Supposed to be here more, if we have some metal thing to put here to increase this, this it will be the exact correction there.
We were sitting probably over a cup of coffee or something, and I just asked him, I said, how did you, come to create the theremin? And he said, I was working on a radio. And all of a sudden, I heard a sound that I knew didn't come from a radio program, that I knew it was a sound that was coming from the radio. And he said, I became interested in what was producing it. And he said, gradually, he said, I learned to control it.
For engineers today who are used to sophisticated, complex electronics, you look in at a modern electronic organ or a synthesizer, and there's hundreds of parts, and they all have, are extremely complex. And then you look into one of Theremin's original instruments, and there's nothing inside. It's all smarts. It's all high efficiency design. It's something that we don't do anymore. We can't do it anymore. We've lost the touch. And from all my work designing and building theremins, I had trained my ears. I got so I could play in tune. I got so that I could do a decent vibrato and do decent phrasing. And that carried right through to my synthesizer work, that I understood what made a good sound and what musicians found useful. The period from 1965 or 1966 to 1970 or 71 was a half a decade of the most incredible catastrophic change in the way music is produced and the sort of music that is made and so on. It was a period of great turmoil. You start out, 1965 rock and roll was just getting going. Synthesizers were still very experimental devices. Along comes Switched on Bach with Wendy Carlos. Along comes the Grateful Dead and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. along comes the civil rights movement and all the socio-cultural factors out there that got overheated in the acid drug culture, and it all got mixed up by the media in this incredible brew, and what came out was nothing like what went in. You know, what went in the case of the theremin was Clara Rockmore and Dr. Samuel Hoffman. What came out was Paul Conley of Lothar and the Hand People and Brian Wilson.
I love the colorful clothes she wears and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. I hear the sound of a gentle word on the wind that lifts her perfume through the air. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations.
Well, actually, it started when I was a child. Actually, when I was a little 8-year-old kid, my dad and mom took me over to their friend's house who had a theremin, right? And the guy was playing it, and I was scared to death of that sound. It really frightened me a lot. I really got scared. You know, I didn't want to hear that sound. You know, that theremin sound, that you know, that sound. It sounded like one of those horrible, scary movies where, you know, weird trip. You know, weird facial expressions, weird. You know, it's almost sexual.
Are you all right?
Yes.
Take you home.
No. Take me to the mine.
Oh, no. No, please.
Well, because I thought to myself, you know, I'm picking up good vibrations, and I thought the cello was going, and I said, as long as we're doing something eerie today, why not get real eerie and put a theremin on it, you know? At the high it needed, so like, ah. Now, a theremin, when we got the theremin on there, we got it on there so that people could understand the theremin in finite terms, finite musical terms, in exact terms. I'm not talking about well, you know what I mean, in terms of written music. But in a sense, it had an unwritten sound to it. It didn't sound really written. And what we're doing, Good Vibrations was probably of all the Beach Boy records, probably the best combination of instruments and most unique way of taking conventional instruments that had only been associated with adults, you know, and children, 21-year-old children, 25-year-old children too, you know. I mean, children of God are in their 20s. You know what I mean? They're in their 20s. They're 20-year-olds, and not really rapidly approaching 30 at all. Right in there, in like mid 25, 26-year-old people, you know, year-old children, young adults, not quite adults really, but kind of flamboyant, a little bit. What would you call it? Whimsical, you know, whimsical personalities and whimsical sense of humor, a whimsical sense of humor. The situation with Good Vibrations, I don't think it was a funny record. It didn't make me laugh, you know. It made me cry because I had seen the idea. I had at once made sure that I had grasped the idea that when you take classical instruments and place them in a rock and roll environment, you have refined music. You have rock and roll brought to a height. Really, and you know, and it's a real funny thing. Nobody ever really called Good Vibrations a rock and roll record, but it was a rock and roll record. It rocked, you know, it really rocked. That's how that line went. Hey. I'm picking up had no idea that it would be a hit record. We had thought we weren't even going to release it because it was so bizarre. It was such a
cello and a theremin.
Yeah, it was a bizarre record. Our company, our record company said, Capitol Records goes, that's too long. They said it's too long. It was 3:35. You know, the time on it was 3 minutes and 35 seconds. 3 minutes and 35 seconds, and the company said, our Capitol Records said, we were going to go with Help Me Rhonda. No, wait, what was the record that with Barbara Ann or something like that? They wanted to release Barbara Ann. And we said, no, let me logically convince you that this record, we didn't think, and then after we had gotten people over to over to our houses listening, people are flipping, they're going, whew, that's a great fucking record, man. And I said, but our company doesn't want to release it. And they said, well, you shouldn't listen to your company, force them to put it out, you know? And that goddamn record went out and went to #1 in the nation, in the whole nation. And all because of that theremin and the cello.
I better not be the only one who does this.
Oh, Todd, we wouldn't do that to you.
You can't, oops, can't get up that high.
И в том числе электронная музыка. Эта лаборатория закрывается, Лев Сергеевич переходит в лабораторию акустики в Московской консерватории. Здесь он работает 10 лет, очень плодотворно, его с большой любовью там вспоминают. Очень много он сделал для изучения именно музыкальной акустики. В том числе в этой лаборатории он сделал несколько терпситонов, там стояли терменвоксы, приходили к нему студенты, и он пользовался большой любовью среди студентов. Однако через 10 лет, в 1974 году, Льва Сергеевича увольняют из консерватории. Какая же этому была причина? Дело в том, что в начале 70-х годов его случайно обнаружил в консерватории один из корреспондентов «Нью-Йорк Таймс». И это было ошеломляющим событием. Корреспондент пишет в «Нью-Йорк Таймс» статью, что Лев Сергеевич оказывается жив, этот замечательный изобретатель оказывается жив и работает в консерватории. Эту статью читает заместитель директора и обнаруживает, что для советского учреждения это совсем не подходящее, что какой-то реабилитированный изобретатель так прославляется за границей, он не имеет права работать в консерватории. Он заявляет Термену, что электронная музыка не может существовать, что электричество годно только для того, чтобы убивать людей на электрическом стуле. И под предлогом ремонта лабораторию акустики закрывают, все инструменты Льва Сергеевича из нее выносят, а терпситоны просто разламывают топором.
On behalf of Stanford University, I'd like to present you Professor Theremin with the Centennial Medal. And I'll just read the citation. With appreciation for distinguished participation in Stanford University's Centennial Celebration, October 1st, we're a little ahead of time here, 1991, Leon Theremin.
address here?
My address was here, 37 West 54th Street.
And did you live here also?
Yes, also I happened, I think it was on the fourth floor. That was my place. And from the other floors, it was different kind of studio, or for dancing, or for play the music. And also they have some mechanical constructions. Albert sang, yes. He was theoretical. So he come first, he come to me with his wife. She was the violinist, and also she played piano. And I saw him playing of the instrument, and then again he tried to play himself. He have not too got a good ear, but still he was playing to instrument on the Theremin works.
So now, if I see him now after all these years, I don't even know whether it's good or not. Sometimes it's good to live with your memories and not try to we're no longer the same as we were, obviously. Last time when I saw him in Moscow, he told me that he thinks of me always not reality. He says, you're a dream. Already then, having gone through what he did, you know, this part of his life seemed to be a dream. Лев Сергеевич, заходи, заходи.
Да.
Ну, о, как я рада тебя видеть. Какое-то счастье. Дай твою шляпу. Мы ее положим сюда. И пальто твое. Это называется не во сне, а наяву. Суждено нам было встретиться еще раз. Правда, на старости лет.
Ну, еще не такие старые.
Ты меня узнаешь?
Не такие старые.
Нет? Но ты меня узнаешь?
Ну, еще бы.
Да?
Немножко,
Я прическу переменила.
Немножко выросла.
Ну, пора, пора. Дай мне свое пальто. Дай я положу. Вот. Раньше, чем мы сядем, хочу тебе показать. Вот твой старый, мой первый терминбокс, которым я научилась играть, это RCA, это старая модель. На этом, и я его никогда не отдала, не продала. Вот для меня это так же ценно, как моя четвертушка-скрипка. Я до сих пор ее берегу. А это, я говорю, это мой первый терминбоксик. А портрет, конечно, моей сестры Нади, ты узнаешь она. А здесь на почетном месте Лев Сергеевич Theremin. Понимаешь, и ты у меня тут живешь на рояле. Всегда.
Я очки я тоже иногда ношу.
А, так тебе трудно видеть. А этот мой портрет, который на всех твоих пластинках. Хороший звук, правда, нежный. И я тогда у тебя требовала более быструю левую руку. Этого не было раньше. Всегда было глиссанда, а теперь быстрая стаккатная рука. На старом нельзя было это делать. Это я тебя вдохновила, по-моему. Это мой единственный плюс. Я тебе дала, чтобы моими музыкальными требованиями, а ты моментально все мог сделать. Ты вообще гениальный человек. Вот тебе. Теперь будем о чем-то другом говорить. Чай пить. Правда? Ты приехал сюда не слушать, а получить удовольствие от нашей встречи. Повезло нам, правда? Как?
Thank you.